Hello medieval gaming enthusiasts, my name is AlzaboHD. In today's challenge video, we will see if our dynasty can survive generations of keeping it in the family. Join me as we embark on an epic quest, where we make our family tree look like a conga line, spread our dynastic seed within and without our realm, and ultimately reform Christianity to worship our divine legacy. But before we embark on a quest for the fabled Habsburg chin, I'd like to give a special thanks to Paradox Interactive, the developers and publishers of Crusader Kings 3 and the sponsor of today's video. When starting a new campaign in CK3, it's important to know that almost all realms and playable religions in the two starting dates prohibit most forms of royal intermarriage. Luckily for us, there are nearly 100 religions that we can later adopt, with several permitting unrestricted marriage that will allow this challenge to get started off on the right chin. To make this challenge even more difficult, we will start off our campaign in Iron Man mode as a lowly count in the small realm of Brittany, with our primary goal set to usurp the title of Emperor of West Francia and survive the curse of blue blood or sacre bleu. And so begins the journey of our heroic protagonist, Count Alfrond of Cournouaille. Alfrond starts in 867 AD as a 67-year-old unmarried count, but luckily for us, he also has a son and primary heir for when he inevitably kicks the bucket. Our first goal with Alfrond will be to consolidate the lands of Brittany and take out the various counts within and outside our de jure borders. Our first target is the independent county of Lyon to our north, which we will take by declaring a holy war and invading the province. With our superior numbers, we make short work of the Norse colonists and occupy the county, ultimately winning the war and enforcing our demands. We now possess the territory of Brest, and our armies are bolstered by the levies we can raise from our expanded domain. But before we can press our claim on neighboring lands, Count Alfrond dies from a mysterious illness, leaving his 29-year-old son and heir Ulfred as the new Count of Cournouaille. Upon inheriting his father's realm, Count Ulfred's first order of business is to fabricate a claim and invade the county of Rennes that lies to the east. After a mere 6 months, the county is within our domain, and our mission to consolidate Brittany is well on its way. To our south, there's yet another fellow vassal we can overtake. After dispatching the meager forces of Nantes, the county slides into our control, and we now have 4 provinces, which is above our domain limit of 3. We cannot afford to give any of these holdings to vassals. Effectively, we are now in what is often considered North Korea mode, whereby our country is directly controlled by our dynastic regime. Up until this point, our trusty protagonist has remained a devout Catholic. But if we are to complete our challenge of keeping it in the family, we'll have to convert to a Christian sect more conducive to obtaining pure blue blood. Ultimately, the teachings of 4th century Adamite Christianity catches the Count's attention, as the religion permits royal intermarriage, establishes equality between men and women, and even frees adherents from the shackles of clothing, allowing believers to embrace nudity and probably making YouTube demonetize this video. With a simple click and a modest investment of 250 piety, Ulfred and the Count of Cournouaille converts to the Adamite faith, laying the foundation of royal intermarriage that would later define the dynasty for generations to come. Although already married, Count Ulfred is quick to recruit his daughter Proschen as his first concubine. But this arrangement would prove temporary, as once the Count's son and heir, Alfrond II, came of age, he was married to his sister wife, to ensure offspring of noble blood. The Count remained ambivalent about this development, as he still harbored feelings towards his progeny and continued to write her love letters in an effort to regain her attention. The Countess of Brest's reply was swift and unambiguous. She replied, "A declaration of passion to your own daughter? The mere thought of us together makes me sick." The King of Brittany and Count Ulfred's liege was also disgusted by the state of affairs in his vassal's domain, and began forcibly converting the court of Ulfred in an effort to retake the realm in the name of Catholicism. Ulfred knew that something had to be done with his liege, and that freedom must be won. Independence was declared, the king's capital was sacked, and our former liege was put into prison. The petty king of Brittany was now helpless against the advance of the Adamite faith, as Count Ulfred obtained independence and freedom for his dynasty. But Ulfred himself was growing old, and at the ripe age of 64 passed into heaven, leaving the realm in the capable hands of his firstborn son and heir Alfred II. Upon the new count's succession to the throne, the realm had been split and divided between his various sisters, brothers, and cousins. The Breton domain needed reunification, and Alfred's first move was to liberate Lens from his sister-in-law. This reconquest was easy peasy, and the Count's next move was to retake the realm's ancestral capital of Cournouaille from his second sister. And speaking of sisters, Alfred's sister-wife reconverted to Catholicism, a heretical cult that forbade divine marriage. This was no doubt the work of the former Liege of Brittany, a tyrannical bastard that imposed his papist doctrine on the court of Cournouaille. With his sister-wife now a proper Adamite acolyte, Alfred set about improving relations with her in an effort to regain her heart and produce more divine heirs for the emerging realm. But before further progeny could be produced, the former petty king of Brittany took offense yet again with our peaceful faith and declared a holy war against the realm and the Adamite faith. But God did not favor the heretical papist invaders, rewarding the acolytes of Adam with victory after victory against their former liege. When the former king of Brittany had his face melted off by Adamite iron, the war was over. Count Alfred decided to bolster his dynasty and faith, marrying his daughters and brothers together as is tradition. In order to preserve his family's unique way of life, Alfred's next move was to lay claim to the kingdom of Brittany and usurp the newly crowned papist queen that threatened the realm. Alfred declared war on the Queen of Brittany and single-handedly defeated her forces on the battlefield, usurping the crown of King of Brittany for himself. But holding so many counties directly under crown control was no longer feasible, and the newly coronated king designated titles to his relatives in order to populate the lands with loyal vassal subjects. Unfortunately for Alfred, the wounds he sustained in combat began to fester and become infected, felling him at the young age of 48, and leaving the petty kingdom of Brittany in the hands of his son and primary heir, Ulfred II. The newly crowned king's first order of duty was to divorce his unrelated wife and find a suitable dynastic partner. The most logical choice was of course his half-sister and first cousin, Morgane. His second objective was clear. He needed to secure more power, and to that end he decided to revoke the county of Lens from his cousin and take direct control of the holding. Great news, everyone! Ulfred's son and primary heir, Alfred III, is finally of age, so it's time to practice the family tradition and purify the bloodline. Little Alfred is married to his first cousin Bertiza, but something seems wrong. Is that clothing? Such barbaric coverings have no place in the court of Cournouaille, and Bertiza is forcibly baptized in the way of the Adamite faith. And speaking of the Adamite faith, Ulfred II embarks on forcibly arranging the marriage of all of his cousins, half-siblings, and extended family to each other as is tradition. In terms of foreign affairs, the massive empire of West Francia splits apart upon the death of their Carling king, and Ulfred sees a golden opportunity to expand his realm. Without further ado, a holy war is declared on Aquitaine for the Duchy of Poitiers, and the newly founded kingdom crumbles under the forces of Brittany. The Aquitanian rulers are imprisoned, their forces routed on the battlefield, and defeat came quickly, paving the way for the Breton annexation of western France. The newly conquered holdings are granted to siblings and cousins, and the spread of the Adamite faith and Breton culture takes hold throughout all of the new lands. The first sign of consanguinity is appearing. Our nephew is a drunkard dwarf despite not having any relatives with the genetic trait, so of course we will gladly accept his invite for a feast. King Ulfred is so impressed by his merriment that he grants his nephew dwarf the hand of his second daughter in marriage. Our dynasty has achieved regional renown, and we can now select our first family legacy. There's only one proper choice. We have to ensure the survival of our family, and we must preserve our noble blood. To celebrate, Ulfred II forges a new title and founds the Kingdom of Brittany. The newly coronated king is now appointed by the glory of Adam and God, and it's finally time to expand the realm once again. The decision to invoke a holy war on West Francia comes swiftly, and Breton troops move to occupy the land in the name of Ulfred II. Before long, though, the kingdom of West Francia passes into the hands of the Queen of Jerusalem? Jerusalem is huge, and we decide to cut our invasion short and renounce our holy war in the face of such insurmountable odds. Instead, Ulfred turns his eyes to the south for another holy war against Aquitaine for the Duchy of Limousin. The war goes incredibly easy, and the southern king is captured in combat, allowing Ulfred to enforce an early peace and expand the realm once again. But on the topic of family, things are starting to get rather confusing. Our son and simultaneous nephew Ulfred III is married to our first cousin and simultaneous niece Magdalene II. All things are perfectly balanced, and our granddaughter Tiburge is born as an inbred dwarf, the first of our family to have the honor of possessing pure blood, but certainly not the last. An inspiration, King Ulfred II decides to marry his firstborn daughter, after passing off his half-sister cousin wife to yet another second cousin. At the ripe age of 58, Ulfred II has 12 children and counting, and their lineage is confusing at best. Many are simultaneously his son, nephew, and brother-in-law at the same time. His youngest son is somehow both his direct offspring and his grandson at the same time. Historians to this day are confounded by the dynasty's lineage, and much like a fine wine, the family tree will only improve over time. But speaking of future generations, Ulfred II contracted leprosy in the year of our Lord 951 AD, and promptly passed into Adamite heaven, leaving the realm in the hands of his rotund first son, Alfred II. But there was no time for mourning, as the Dukes of Armagnac taunted our plump protagonist by decrying his well-known appetite and declaring war on the realm. Rallying his troops, Alfred II fought valiantly, but in the midst of battle was informed that his wife, Queen Bertisa, was having an affair, and not keeping it in the family. The punishment for this crime is of course death, but for now, Alfred decides to divorce his unfaithful cousin Queen and betroth himself to his second cousin. Unfortunately, Alfred II had yet another brush with misfortune, as he was diagnosed with smallpox and died not a year into his reign. He will forever be remembered for his appetite and historic irrelevance, while his second son and brother-in-law, the genetically disfigured and club-footed King Ulfred III, ascended to the throne at the age of 20. It is often said that misery loves company, and only a week into his rule, the new king of Brittany, Ulfred III, was issued an ultimatum to renounce his claim and title of realm ruler. The claimant was none other than his cousin and wife Queen Prashen, and their combined forces were too high to contest in open war. So the now petty King Ulfred decided to bide his time and divorce his new liege. The ongoing war was no longer of any consequence either, as the war ruler was now his ex-wife. So Ulfred endeavored to remarry in the tradition of his father and father's father. To that end, he wed and bed Princess Ladluguien, his second aunt and a fellow sufferer of congenital genetic deformities, including the new addition of hemophilia. After all, you gotta catch them all. But Ulfred was not content to stand aside while his ex-wife cousin aunt ruled in his stead. He promptly set up a faction against his liege to press his claim, and invited all of his remaining loyal cousins-in-law to his banner. With more than 130% the effective forces of his ex-wife, he sent an ultimatum, and his traitorous ex-cousin bowed down and promptly reinstated Ulfred as the rightful king of all of Brittany. There is power in family bonds. Our cousins in the county of Lyon are first to ascend to the status of pure-blood double-dwarven inbred genetics. You should probably consult a doctor if your family tree looks like this masterpiece of medieval misfortune. And speaking of misfortune, our inbred dwarven cousin sent us yet another ultimatum to grant our sister cousin Elena the Duchy of Brittany and the populous county of Nantes, by far our realm's most productive province. With great sadness, Ulfred honored the demand and remained king of Brittany. Preying upon this weakness, the Catholic Duke of Neustria declared a holy war for our county of Lyon. Given the heretics' advantage, our saddened king had no choice but to surrender his realm's claim to the heretics, and vowed to retake the land when fortune again favored his sails. In order to rebuild his power base, he quickly set out on revoking his sister's holdings in Nantes and Vannes, greatly empowering his armies and re-establishing a hold on the historic crown lands of his dynasty. With a newfound power base and his hold on the throne secure, Ulfred III endeavored to conquer the newly splintered realm of France that disintegrated upon the death of the Queen of Jerusalem. He conquered the Duchy of Berry, the Duchy of Burgundy, the Duchy of Anjou, and the Duchy of Orléans in quick succession. In a span of 10 years, the realm emerged 3 times larger than before, and a new era of both nudity and prosperity began to take shape across the land. When Ulfred III passed away at the age of 73, his son and inbred heir King Gwerich I ascended to the throne. In terms of competence, King Gwerich is surprisingly skilled for an inbred character, possessing considerable intelligence that we will soon put to use. The first order of business for our pure-blooded king is to divorce his distantly related cousin and seek out a more youthful and closely related first cousin. Our inbrededness is presenting a challenge in maintaining our dynasty's grip on power, given that the inbred trait confers innate penalties to fertility and attraction. And to make matters even worse, inbred rulers suffer from penalties on opinion towards all of their vassal subjects. It was only a matter of time before civil war broke out, and rather than granting concessions like his cowardly father, our pure-blooded protagonist answered the pretenders with iron and steel. It took nearly 2 years of war, occupations, and assassinations to pacify the upstart traitors. And once victory was assured, King Gwerich sent all of the realm's traitors to the dungeons, where he promptly stripped the nobles of all of their titles and forcibly took his disloyal cousins as his concubines. And there's more great news from the court. Gwerich's firstborn inbred dwarven son Renan is finally of age, which means that he can take part in the family tradition and betroth a suitable first cousin. Of course, the renown of our divine dynasty is readily apparent, and our resilient blood will further cement the dynastic legacy of the kings and queens of Brittany. The Cournouaille dynasty's noble intermarriage is paying off across our realm, with some of our subjects showing considerable signs of blue blood, like our cousin Count Tudoric, an inbred, scaly, club-footed, gout-ridden, wounded eunuch. Though the cost of perfection is often high, the rewards are often worth the wait. Meanwhile at court, our dwarven inbred heir is intent on racking up his KD ratio, and he was found murdering Gwerich's cousin wife in cold blood. Rather than punish his rightful blue-blooded heir, Gwerich decided to pardon his son and become close friends. They say that friendship is magic, and speaking of magic, Gwerich's devout faith in keeping it in the family has resulted in the accumulation of thousands of piety. You know what that means. It's time to found a new Christian religion, something more conducive to our goal of obtaining genetic purity. To that end, the true faith of Sanguius Sanctus, or Sacred Blood, is proclaimed with Gwerich as the prophetic temporal leader. The new faith prizes divine marriage between close relatives, exalts carnal pleasure between adherents, and retains the clothing-optional approach of our ancestral Adamite religion. But not everyone approves of the new faith. The schism between the Adamite heresy and the true religion of Sanguicism has just begun. And while our new faith is blossoming in its new beginnings, our prophetic king has reached the end of his journey. Gwerich the prophet died at the astoundingly old age of 72, despite his severe genetic deformities, leaving the realm in the little fingers of his inbred dwarven son and heir, Renan I. Despite his small stature as arguably the most inbred of Breton kings, Renan's first objective upon coronation was to arrange a marriage to his firstborn 12-year-old daughter. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this divine marriage provoked reactionary sentiment, not least from the heretical Adamite zealots who remained within the realm. Their numbers greatly outnumbered those of King Renan's levies, and threatened to throw back the realm into the dark ages of Adamite heresy. Unfortunately for the little lord, things would only go downhill from here. A mere 2 months later, Pope Clemens II declared a crusade against our holdings in Lotharingia, and barely a half-year afterwards, French populists revolted against the realm. Renan now faced 3 simultaneous wars on multiple fronts, both within and outside his realm, no doubt a result of his subjects hating his inbred characteristics. At this point, Renan had no choice but to surrender to the traitorous vassals who sought to curtail his royal authority, granting his vassals tall powers over their tiny king. The ongoing crusade was also an absolute disaster, as Renan's forces were outnumbered 4-1 and unable to rout the Papist invaders. The decision was made to grant the heretics the Duchy of Lotharingia so that the realm could repair and rearm itself to answer future threats. And future threats were everywhere, with French Catholic rebels taking their turn in the conga line to rise up and challenge their rightful king and ruler. Now truly this is the time of troubles for the Cournouaille dynasty, but hope still remains for a brighter future. Renan's daughter-wife became pregnant, a miracle of biblical proportions, and on the war front, the Catholics were decidedly routed, and a holy war was proclaimed to conquer the Duchy of Burgundy and revenge the Breton loss in the Lotharingian Crusade. Of course, victory was all but assured, further expanding the realm and paving the foundation of the Kingdom of West Francia. In the year of our Lord 1062 AD, the rightful king of all of France rules over a prosperous and unified realm. Despite his genetic deformities and pure-blooded inbrededness, Renan and his daughter-wife have 6 living children that will maintain the lineage and keep it in the family for centuries to come. I'm actually quite surprised that this dynasty was not only able to survive for hundreds of years of royal intermarriage, but also managed to possess more than 250 living members by the middle part of this campaign. The family tree is incredibly long, spindly, and looks like a line. It's actually so large that it lags my computer, and when clicking on any of the various cadet branches of the Cournouaille dynasty, there's more than a 50% chance of stumbling across a inbred or blue-blooded individual. Outside of our dynasty, the world itself is also quite unusual. The Sami tribe, originally indigenous to northern Scandinavia, controls southern France, Provence, and the eastern coast of Iberia, and we have yet to declare war on them since they have nearly 30,000 troops. Further to the east, the Byzantine Empire is a tentacular mess of unrefined border gore, present in all continents and surprisingly intact. Central Europe is itself dominated by a monstrous Poland, with the carling rump state of Lotharingia on its last leg. To the north of our realm, the British Isles have unified under a Gaelic tribe that resisted Viking and Anglo-Saxon settlement, and this is incredibly rare, as I have yet to see this in any of my ongoing CK3 campaigns. Before ending the video, I'd like to thank you for watching this far and supporting the algorithm. If you like Crusader Kings and want more strategy gaming content, I also humbly request that you usurp the like button and claim the throne of the subscription box. On this YouTube channel, you can find a variety of other challenge videos, like that time we had a eunuch found a dynasty or that strange encounter between Glitterhoof the horse and the Scottish court. There's also a variety of top 10 videos and guides to help you in your quest in conquering the medieval and early modern world. A special thanks as well to Paradox Interactive for sponsoring this video, and if you're interested in checking out Crusader Kings 3, there is a link to this game in the description box and comment section below. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next video. It's time now to roll the credits.